Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Welcome back to this first seminar under the Data Science. First of all, I'd like to thank Simon for helping us to organize the seminar, and of course Nick at the back. Angie has been instrumental in the arrangements, and also Delaney really helped us get set up today. So thank you to Delaney as well. I'm honored to introduce Professor Susan Reiser. She's a senior lecturer emerita from UNC-Asheville, and Susan has taught many classes in computer science, new media, and mechatronics engineering. And she's developed over 25 courses in these three disciplines. Before teaching, she worked in an industry position as a software developer and systems engineer. And the reason we are delighted to have Susan on campus and delighted to welcome her to give this seminar is because she works very closely with one of our lab members, Courtney Starrett, who is a visual artist with, so it's this collaboration between visual art and more technical side of computer science, and Susan comes in to contribute to that technical side. So she collaborates very closely with Courtney. She's going to show us some work today that she has completed with Courtney and with other collaborators across the arts. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Professor Reiser.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for being here today. I know it's the beginning of the semester, and I know how very busy you are. So thank you for your time today. I'm a native Floridian who now lives in Asheville. And if you do not know Asheville, it's a small community of about 90,000 nestled in the mountains of Western North Carolina. The outdoor activities and education abounds. The arts, brewing scene is very vibrant. Our main industry is tourism. And it's also the home of the National Climatic Data Center, the largest repository of weather data, NOAA's weather data in the United States. In this talk, what I would like to do is present projects that connect computer graphics with society and show the interconnections with those projects with CS 2023, the curricular guidelines for undergraduate computer science education. And what makes it, I think, a cornerstone of a modern liberal arts education. So I got started in visualization as an undergrad, writing software for Duke's Med School, where I did projects for the epidemiology department and for the cardiology department. And that really changed my life. I was a very lackadaisical computer science student until that point. And that made me want to learn about graphics, about image processing, about computer vision. Duke had none of those courses. So I took the bus over to UNC Chapel Hill, where I could take classes in all three subjects, and then went on to graduate school. I worked for many years in the electrophysiology lab, mapping, and this is after graduate school, mapping potential gradients. And you could really argue that this is the high point of my research career, was this paper in 1988, which was given as a plenary session at IEEE's Computers in Cardiology. 2 days later, I got married, moved into industry. I've never given a plenary session since. And I worked in industry first as a programmer, and then over the course of many years became a principal software engineer. Then moved to Asheville. My job, which required a 2-hour response time anywhere on the eastern seaboard, was not possible with our little 2-gate airport in Asheville. So I went to UNCA, to the longtime computer science chair, and said, could I teach C programming? I've been a C programmer for 10 years. I know my C programming. It's going to be great. You can imagine what happened that first night with my students. I started talking, they started nodding, I went on to the next chapter. They continued to nod. I went on. By the end of a 2.5-hour first class, I'm at chapter 5 in an 11 chapter book. Okay. I realized I did not know how to teach. I didn't know how to program. I did not know how to teach. So I learned to slow down. I went down that rabbit hole of teaching and learning. How could I better convey the information to the students? How could I hook the students, who were maybe hard to reach? How could I make it relevant to them? My background was developing software for other people, which unless you are in research, you typically are developing software for other people. And I would argue in visualization and data materialization, you're developing to convey an audience, a story to an outside audience. So I wanted to give that experience to my students. So as a team, we developed the first website for the city of Asheville, produced an interactive CD-ROM with the library on the history of Asheville. Then our target audience was 4th graders and they weren't paying attention to it. So we added games into it to make them engaged with the material. We designed websites for the whole city parks. We wrote games for the 6th grade math teachers to try and get their students to test well at the end of grade testing. More recently, I've worked with North Carolina's Poet Laureate, Jackie Sheldon Green, to design large sculptures, large public sculptures that interpret her work. And also for Hood Huggers International, designing sculptures for their historically Black neighborhood, which was affected by urban development since the 50s. And in the upcoming I-26 enlargement is once again going to be bisected in the next 5 years. So we did user testing in the schools and city halls and in area parks. I started working with Sensor, which is the science of new civic engagements and responsibilities, which was an NSF-funded approach to improving science education. For a while, I served as co-director of the Sensor Center of Innovation South. And their research supports integrating science education with local, national, and global issues, and that enhances student learning. Their assessments were such that they were funded for 17 consecutive years by the NSF and have been adopted by the National Academies of Science. Moreover, it emphasized the assessing of student learning rather than what is taught. And that's a nuanced different distinction, but it is a very real distinction. And the National Academies of Sciences have also supported that. So since 2020, I've been a member of the steering committee for CS 2023. And I chaired the graphics and interactive techniques knowledge area and served on the Society Ethics and the Professions subcommittee. Earlier this year, it was endorsed by ACM, IEEE, Computer Society, and AAAI, and then copy edited, and then finally published in May of this year. So it is available in the digital library if you want to look at it. What's new this year is that compared to the prior versions, which started in the late 50s, in addition to the traditional knowledge model, it offers a competency model. Again, a focus on what students learn as well as what we teach. So I taught computer science courses for a while and was the graphics person in our very small department. We have a school of 3,000 students, so my classes are so much smaller than yours. So I taught the graphics courses, I developed the image processing course, the computer viz classes, and the animation classes. We, in 1998, established a new media program, the first undergraduate program of its kind, and it quickly became one of the biggest programs on campus. And then because I taught the senior projects course in computer science, I got pulled into the mechatronics engineering. And mechatronics is kind of a three-legged discipline that involves computer engineering, electrical engineering, and mechanical engineering, which is fascinating to me. And so I taught the senior design sequence for a while. Then, right about then, I met Courtney Sterrett, and we have been collaborating since 2016, building mostly data materializations, a term that we coined. I retired in December. So aside from my volunteer work with SIGGRAPH and I do serve on the ACM Ed board, I work with Courtney. This is a super exciting time for me. So this is a picture of our first collaboration at the Dworsky Museum in New Paltz. And behind us is a installation of probably 200 silicone doilies, which she hand cast from data regarding women and professions. So when Courtney does much of her fabrication here at Texas A&M, sometimes I do fabrication at our STEAM studio, which is our 12,000 square foot making place, of which I'm one of the 6 co-founders. And I really think that these collaborative interdisciplinary projects are an integral part of the liberal arts and science education. They align with the AAC and U's definition of undergraduate education, which emphasizes the integration of learning across disciplines and experiential learning. So in 2015, they challenged all educators to incorporate a significant signature work for all undergraduate students. What does that mean? Signature work could be an undergraduate research project. It could be a capstone project. It could be a senior design project. But it's a project that takes at least a semester, that a student is driven by the student. And they did that not just because it's a high impact educational practice, but also because industry, over 90% of the industries that they surveyed wanted that type of experience in the people that they hired. It requires communication with an outside audience to present that material. What we do when we create a visualization, typically we're working with data, not from visualization, but from another area, another subject. And we're designing a visualization that will be observed or interacted with by an outside audience. That's communication, isn't it? Interdisciplinary learning empowers students to tackle real-world problems. Students might engage in projects that require them to apply the scientific method. They have to consider societal and ethical implications. You and I both know that you can create a data visualization or a data materialization that may not edit the data, but may not ethically interpret the data. It may convey a message which is not true. So I want to also thanks mention two other collaborators. Before I worked with Courtney, I worked with Rebecca Bruce, who chaired our mechatronics program, although she's a computer scientist, but she's also an engineer. And I want to acknowledge Sarah Sanders, the director of STEAM Studio. Rebecca and I co-developed a number of courses, including the first robotics course at UNCA. The robotics course was a first-year seminar, another high-impact practice, pulling students in at the beginning of their educational experience to work collectively to practice writing across the curriculum. Needless to say, that's an easy way to stick a new course or try out a course. So we did a lot of these, like 3D modeling. This was a get together before classes started, and the students modeled with food, but later they modeled with actual modeling software. We worked with the local science museum on a exhibit prototype. This would not be something, if you had young children, you would want them to ride on, but by the end of our course, we looked at safety, how we could make this ride safe and fun for young children. No parents worried about getting their fingers pinched. We did projects using a tabletop. Before we had STEAM Studio, we had a tabletop CNC mill. We designed projects in conjunction with 6th grade middle school students, like a little tiny maze. I don't know if you can see it, it's like a Cracker Jack maze that students in the middle school were learning about translations and rotations and scaling. So this was our way of pulling the middle school students in. And that's enough of an age difference with incoming first year college students that that's communicating to a very different audience. And I don't know if you've been around a 6th grader, there's no filter between up here and here. They will tell you exactly what they think of your design, no holds barred. We taught an electronic origami class. We taught a circuit bending class. For about 10 years, I taught a CS0 course infused with culturally relevant craft out on the Qualla boundary, the Cherokee tribal lands, about an hour and a half west of Asheville. It's a Bureau of Indian Affairs high school. Most of the time that work was supported by a Sloan grant. For those of you who haven't taught high schools, I think we have it really easy in college. They meet every day for an hour and a half on a semester that extends about 3 weeks before our semester start and about 3 weeks after our semester start, which gave me plenty of time to cover the standard CS0 learning objectives and do fun things. Like here we are in a closet after we were playing with electroluminescent wire. I also was able to, I really wanted these students to go to college, didn't really care if it was UNCA, but I wanted them to see that college wasn't just an extension of high school, that there were fun residential activities. So I connected it, sorry, my filming was not great. I connected it with a physics class and a dystopia, utopia beekeeping class. And so the beekeeping class taught my students how to harvest honey and process it. The physics students built solar melters to purify the honey. And then my students taught the other 2 classes how to build 3D molds. And then we created beeswax soaps. And then in 2015, Rebecca and I developed a course called Creative Fabrication, Art Meets Technology. It was based in computer science and engineering, but we reserved a third of the slots for art students. This was great because at UNC-Asheville, our computer science and our engineering classes are gender, well, they're not equal in terms of gender representation. We typically have between 10 and 17% women in those courses. Sculpture, on the other hand, flips that, majority female. So by melding these two disciplines, we were able to get a nice gender balance and start students off at the first year collaborating outside of their discipline. I will admit there was a lot of skepticism at the beginning of every course we taught, but by the end of the semester, they acknowledged, I wouldn't say 100%, but most of the time, 90%, that they received very valuable feedback and would not have been able to have the end product that we had. We got a lot of press on this. We started working with the medical faculty at Chapel Hill. We had a physical therapist and an occupational therapist. We worked for the entire semester with residents of a senior Section 8 senior home and developing assistive technology for those residents. And it was, I shouldn't have said for, I should have said with and for those residents. Every project was evaluated on its function and its form and its appropriateness to the personality of the resident. Resident had to like it. They had to like what it looked like and to like the way it functioned. So in that class, because we were collaborating with our colleagues in sculpture, we got a hands-on look at materials. We 3D printed different parts and then took them to sculpture where we dipped them in a ceramic slurry, put them in a kiln, burned out the 3D PLA print, and used it for lost wax casting, or I guess more appropriately, lost PLA casting. And if you've never seen a bronze, liquid bronze, it glows green, an absolutely unbelievable experience. And it really gave our engineering students a chance to work with materials to see how incredibly heavy bronze is compared to aluminum. Like you can look at the data on that, but when you're designing like a cane or a claw for climbing, it really drives home how impractical bronze, as gorgeous as it might be, is for some applications. Those 3 sculpture faculty and the 3 of us, Rebecca, Sarah Sanders, now the director of STEAM, and myself, created the STEAM, we're able to found our STEAM studio. I'm super, super delighted to be on that team. I realize there's one extra person, the architect is also shown in that picture. So this is kind of what our STEAM looks like, our STEAM studio looks like. We received very generous funding from the Wingate Foundation, from Duke Power, and NC State even contributed. It's a whole campus resource outfitted by Sarah. And we call it a making place that encourages and nurtures interdisciplinary collaboration. There are no walls, so it's super loud, but there are no walls, so you can't silo yourself. You wind up getting feedback from whoever's working in there. It's just a great place to be. And here's Sarah doing what she does best, welding. And she now, or up until December, co-taught creative fabrication with me. Oops. So 2016 is when I met Courtney, and this was our first piece, as I mentioned before. And every data-informed doily design is produced by a processing script that I wrote with Courtney's critique. And I set it up so that she could manipulate the design as she wanted it. But I was pulling that data from a CSV file, from an Excel file. We started just doing very basic shapes, and then they went into doilies. How did we meet? We met, I had a small NSF grant, a community twos grant, and I met her, and we just had all these things that we had in common. And then she came to visit me in Asheville afterwards, and we've been collaborating ever since. So layer chiffon was our next piece. And again, we started with a processing script, and Courtney she cast all of those doilies. She also cast these really cool bunt shapes. They are actually buttons. They're like giant bubbles, silicone bubbles. And it was fun for me because I got to build some Arduino switches underneath them, kind of like the very basic switches that you would see at a Halloween haunted house, you know, where you step on it and it triggers some event. So if you push one of those bunt pins, you got to see one video. If you push two, you saw something different. If you were able to lean over and push all three at the same time, you would see something totally different. But we were looking at that time at industry demographics and processed foods. Notice the material, the color of the material, the bouncy, fun nature of the material. We conceptually try, and Courtney's so good at this, at connecting the data to a meaningful form or object. I think the most amazing thing that she fabricated was modern dowry. And it's a silver-plated 3D printed teapot that was exhibited at the City Museum of New York in the summer of 2017. And the curator charged Courtney with finding inspiration in the museum's large collection of colonial silver. And I took a first stab at it because there was this one teapot that had these little scallops around the edges. So I made a teapot very representational where I just blew out those scalloped edges, kind of like in the bunt fan forms. It was not very exciting. Courtney took it and came up with this design, which is to me so lively. And the data represents her financial data. These concave points represent her debts, and then the convex points represent the assets. And this corresponds to the old practice of a dowry. When young couples in colonial time were married, people would give them sterling silver, kind of as a dowry. Now, when we get married, we bring many times our own debts, our student loan debts, whatever debts, into the marriage. But yet, there's also a material focus to this. At its core, this is a invaluable 3D plastic print, right? But it's gilded, or not gilded, that's the wrong word. It's silver plated, so it looks very valuable. It kind of corresponds to, in our society today, you don't know from looking at a person what their asset to debt ratio is. Because of credit, we can all live beyond our means if we choose. So here you can see another little processing script where the circles were just arranged about a circle. And then Courtney took that and can you imagine how much sanding she must have done to get the 3D print to be that smooth? I just can't imagine the amount of time. And how beautiful is it once it is copper plated? And then to get a silver plate, you have to plate the copper. She's just amazing to work at. work with. So what we do in data materializations, you notice there's no label. You can't tell what is her house debt from looking at that T-plot, right? It's non-representation, but the idea is that a data materialization will engage the viewer to want to learn more about it. And our in the doilies, we had an AR application that went along with it. So you could scan one of the doilies and then be routed to a web page that would show you exactly the data set that was used. And in the summer of 2017, Courtney and I had the amazing opportunity to work together at Vassar College, where we taught an undergraduate research course and were able to work on our own work. And it ultimately appeared in an exhibit in the fall of that coming year. And it was with the students' work, which was our first student collaboration. And then back in Asheville, MacArthur Award winner Mel Chin brought Sarah Sanders what was to become our biggest project at STEAM Studio. He had a commission to build an installation at Times Square. He had a nice napkin on which he had sketched a design. And so we took this on as a senior design project in the senior design mechatronics class that Rebecca and I were teaching. It also had an AR application that was developed in Russia, where you could look either through your cell phone or through a 3D headset and see the sculpture and also see the water, the sea level rise in New York above the buildings. It was very cool. But then there were these like Finding Nemo fish that were swimming across, which kind of took away from the effect. But that sculpture wound up being like from the napkin size. We started doing models and he kept going bigger, bigger. And it eventually became a 22-foot high animatronic sculpture at the helm of what looks like ship or whale bones. And the students spent a tremendous amount of time. We met 5 hours every week, coming up with these designs, which had to be approved by engineers in New York City before they were fabricated. Every third weld had to be inspected. Things change as they do when you work with real life clients. They told us to prepare for 80% humidity. About a month before the end of the semester, they said, oh, please prepare for 100% humidity, but it looks like the summer's going to be very damp. Well, that meant the whole HVAC system had to be revised. So while Rebecca and I were the teachers of record, Sarah was always in that class. Sarah led the fabrication, which happened after the semester. The students didn't defer their jobs to help out with the fabrication. I went up to Boston to CNC the arm and the head because we didn't have big enough motors to move the head in white pine. So I machined it. I went to Lowe's and bought a stack of insulation foam and 3D milled it at a 7-axis CNC in Boston. And then, so exciting. Here we are in New York City the first night, and they didn't allow us to bring our crane to get this, it was 1/2-inch thick steel. It was super heavy. They wouldn't allow us to bring our crane out until 10 o'clock at night. So we're just sitting in this cordoned off area in Times Square, waiting for permission to bring a crane in. And you'll notice like people are lining up, they're taking pictures of us like they thought we were gonna dance or do some performance that we were, way too geeky to do. But you can imagine, after it was all done, I'm like so proud of these students. I will keep in touch with them for the rest of my life. They're just amazing. And then it was also quite frightening. There were many times we thought we were going to fail. We had only hired one semi to transport the sculpture materials, and it took us one semi plus two 23-foot box trucks. I hope never to drive one of those again. You can see this was when they were working on the HVAC system, and Brittany just happened to be the daughter of my first female computer scientist. It's kind of fun. And here's what it looked like totally finished. Now that same year, oh no, this was during COVID, Courtney and I created this piece, which is called Spread and Reach, and it's a projection mapped piece that shows the spread of COVID through the US, and then the change that happened when we had COVID shots. It also chronicled the huge number of people who tragically died during COVID and the timing of their deaths. And that project we displayed in Asheville, and I set up a number of shell scripts that would just read the data from the New York Times on a daily basis and update the animation each day. During that same semester, my provost challenged us, because obviously we weren't going to be working with seniors during in senior residents of the Section 8 housing during the pandemic. So he challenged me in creative fabrication to focus on the issues of our time. And you'll remember in 2020, that was the election, and racism in America was also a big. So I needed somebody to collaborate. So of course, who did I ask? Courtney Starrett at Texas A&M. So we had our class, my undergraduate engineering class, and her graduate course in visualization collaborated and made these pieces. This piece is called Cracked Nation. And if you were to draw an axis up the center, this is a marquetry piece, which is a traditional craft in Western North Carolina. If you were to draw a line, each stripe, each different type of wood corresponds to a different demographic who did not vote in the 2016 election. Wasted potential uses resistors to dim the light based on Black and white wealth, education, and representation in Congress. And in unequal growth, one of the engineers illustrated the advantages that some of us share by giving SNAP-P seedlings unequal amounts of light based on race data from on family wealth, and unequal nutrients based on retirement savings. Courtney used that same processing script that did the doilies to hand forge Equal but Different, which celebrates the demographic data of the 116th Congress. At that same exhibit, I wanted my students to learn to weld. So I designed this COVID molecule because there's so many repetitive. I learned by doing something over and over again, so I wanted them to learn to weld. So I had them build this COVID molecule because there's a lot of repetitive welding in that project. And then all of these we exhibited at the National Center for Craft in Asheville in fall, in December of 2020. Since that time, we've had a number of interesting projects come through. One that happened at Steve's studio, again, MacArthur Award winner Mel Chin, and this time Emmanuel Pratt, who was also an award winner, came to us wanting us to design the Safe House Temple door. And so we ran a creative fab class in May. And after that class, some of the class members and the STEAM class started fabricating the door. And later that summer, we traveled to Chicago, to the south side of Chicago, to the Sweetwater Foundation, where it still hangs as a permanent installation on the Civic Arts Church. And this vault door, which does open and close, and the wheel spins, and it locks. And it's supposed to visually mark the historic Black church as a safe space for the community and emphasize the value of the people and the activities that go on inside of the church. Again, during the pandemic, I had my Cherokee High class couldn't meet in person, so we did some visualization projects, one of which was COVID-19 in the US, where she looked at, she assigned the relative size of the stars based on the state's COVID-19 positivity for that particular day. And then Rocky Peebles thought of looking at trout. How much trout the Cherokee replenish in their river. So you can see in March, this big oval, they put in 30,000 pounds of trout in March. Not so much in February, January, basically the winter months when people aren't fishing. All right, that's communicating data I had no idea actually existed. I had no idea that 30,000 pounds of fish and rivers in, I don't know how big rivers are in Texas, but rivers in North Carolina are little. They are like from me to that third desk. 30,000 pounds is remarkable when you think of how many fish into this very narrow river. During the last few years, Courtney and I have been working on worry beads. We've offered a lot of worry bead workshops, like at Grace Hopper, SIGGRAPH Asia 2023, SIGGRAPH 2024. Worries are inherently human. Don't we all have something that we worry about? This particular set shows alternating vertices with relative ice melt. And again, remember how we talked about connecting the material to the data? So Courtney cast the 3D printed beads in silicone, made them into ice, and we made a variety of these at different locations. Most recently, Courtney suggested working with cyanotypes, which is a very accessible process. Allows us to bring workshops to the greater community. In fact, you can see this piece that Courtney made, which incorporates both worry beads. Can you kind of see the outline of the beads melting on the cyanotype? It is in the Alice in the Archives exhibit right now in the Cushing Library here on their campus. We've offered cyanotype workshops to the broader community, not just at academic conferences. For example, here's Courtney at Newtown Creek in New York. The creek separates Brooklyn and Queens, where we used water pollution data to generate shapes. And in Salt Lake City, we used lake level and temperature data to generate shapes. And these are some of the pieces that the attendees at the workshop created. I really believe that data visualization and data materialization provide the opportunity for a natural and necessary collaboration between computer science, art, subject matter experts in other fields, and the greater community. And I'm pretty excited to be at that intersection with Courtney Sterritt. Projects in data visualization and materialization weave a compelling narrative. In nearly every practical application, these initiatives necessitate, they require collaboration across the disciplines. They emphasize teamwork. They involve the design, the development, and the evaluation of innovative and alternate solutions. They require a deep dive into the data and a requirement to evaluate the data and its sources, and a willingness to critique, maybe harder to be critiqued, to accept critique. These type of projects demand a blend of critical and creative thinking alongside effective communication, both verbally and through the work itself. They require us to engage an external audience, be it subject matter experts or the greater community. So isn't that intellectual exercise a fundamental aspect of a liberal arts and sciences education? I think it is. Thank you. Do you all have any questions?
Anybody have any questions, Professor Reiser? I don't know if anyone on Zoom has questions.
Oh, let me see.
And while you're looking, I can ask you a question.
Okay.
How do you think AI is going to disrupt or elevate these efforts?
Ooh, that is a very good question. You know, it's interesting. The ACM Ed Board asked all of the steering committee members and their subcommittees to guess what AI is going to do to our various disciplines within computer science. I don't know. I tell you what I worry about most with visualization, and that is worry about the ethics involved. Right now, the visual databases are training on data that in many times that is under copyright. They are generating images and 3D models based on people's intellectual property. And I don't know how you stop. Intellectual property laws vary so much between country. Who would be the enforcer of that? I don't know. I don't know. Just yesterday, I was working on some data for an upcoming workshop with Courtney, and I asked Midjourney to generate a picture of this seaweed that I really wanted to see. And it gave me a whole lot of images, none of which were seaweed. One was a dragonfly, one was, I had a very specific genus that I wanted it to show. It wasn't even seaweed, it was insects. So I don't know. We put these guesses in for every knowledge area in the computer science curricular guidelines. But then we put the big caveat, we don't know. We actually asked for another year to see where we were a year from now. And so we would have a little better grounding in that. Because how is it going to impact computer science education? How will it impact art? What are your thoughts?
Michael?
Mhm.
I, I think that we have an opportunity to use this as a collaborator. And I think that there's like with anything, there's many issues, a lot of which that you've mentioned, and it's a tool. So I think how we define expectations of how we use that tool is a big responsibility. And people are going to use it for good. I'm sure people are already using it for bad. So I think that there's lots of work that needs to be done in this area to set expectations and to set policies on how these things are used. And I think Europe is actually ahead of us in this. But I see it as an opportunity, not just in the education realm, in all realms. I think there's exciting opportunity to use it as a collaborator in conflict.
Yes.
And I would love to see if I can help you with Midjourney get some better results out, or not necessarily, maybe Dolly to see if we can get better. We can try that.
Okay, well, that would be lovely.
Yeah.
And one of the things, you and I were at that same lecture by Jensen Wong and Mark Zuckerberg, where they spoke about every one of their employees already has a personal AI that they are working with. So it's important to use these tools and to know how to use them. But I think it's still important to know how to program and to know the theory in computer science and know how to write, to recognize good writing. Other questions?
No question.
Okay, well, let's thank Professor Reiser, and thank you all for coming.